All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fungus Among Us. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Paul, and we are getting ready to talk about the final episode of season 1 of the HBO's The Last of Us.
Fungus Apocalypse. Oh, man. So, yeah, to be transparent, Paul and I, originally I had planned with you, Paul, to not talk about this at all until we were recording live. And then I called you right before the show was going to air, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. Like, I'm not ready for this. Only to realize it had already aired and you've watched it.
Yeah, it was daylight savings. You were like, I don't know, out of sync. And I started it right when it went live at 6 p.m. Pacific. And literally, right when it went to the credits, my phone rang, and there's Kelly. And I thought she had just watched it. I was like, oh, are we actually going to talk about it? And then she was like, oh my God, it just dropped. I was like, oh yeah, I just finished it.
Yeah, I was like, what in the world is happening? Yeah, so no, I was sitting there like a loser, ready to hit play or something to that effect, and I just it had already aired. We ended up having conversations about it and realized we weren't ready to really get the recording that we really wanted.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we had a lot of processing to do.
A lot of it was processing.
It's always like this emotional whirlwind when something you love this much gets adapted. And I think that,
Exactly.
and I think by the time we got to the end of the last episode, we had a lot of feelings to sort through, related to the expectations we went into it with, stuff that, we hope for that. I mean, okay, so like on the last episode, I did my 3 big things I wanted, and one of them wasn't there.
Yeah.
And then I was feeling salty about that, which is not necessarily the show's fault because it was a pretty great episode. But this is how it
Yeah.
always goes when they adapt stuff you love.
No, it's tough because I think, looking back at the entire season, it was a brilliant show, and I really fell in love with these characters. I was so grateful to get to know them a little better and in ways that you don't really get to experience in the game. I think holding all of these expectations so heavily in the forefront of my heart, it kind of made it difficult for me to like allow myself to fully immerse myself into each episode. And I sometimes think or wonder maybe that's a part of why I'm like, well, I wish this had happened. I wish this had happened. But again, you and I are both coming at this from having been in this world and having been these characters, which I've brought up many times before, but I love this show so much. So it's hard that it came to an end. I think I'll always feel like there could have been 1 or 2 more episodes, and we'll dive into this a little bit more, but certainly felt as though there should have been an episode of just Joel and Ellie escaping like a particular circumstance, whether it be like infected or raiders, and it just kind of solely focusing on their relationship and building their relationship.
I agree. And I think that like coming out of the show, I think that this is something that I feel pretty confident saying, that I agree with you that, like the Joel and Ellie bond, I didn't quite feel the same way I did in the game. I've talked to people who didn't play the game, also felt there maybe was something missing there. I agree that your proposed fix of an episode that is just focused on them overcoming some ordeal together and bonding through it, I mean, that is the element that I felt like was a little bit absent from the show, because they talk a lot about how much they've been through together, but like we don't actually see them go through too many dangerous situations together
Yeah, it
over
does
the
a
course
lot
of the
of like
season.
telling rather than
Yeah.
showing in
But
that regards.
yeah, and I think we're supposed to understand that a lot of it happened off camera, but with the choice to minimize the action the way that they did, it sort of meant that a lot of the story beats were relatively peril free. They just kind of walk into places and talk to people and leave. There were moments of peril, obviously, but yeah. So I mean, I'm with you on that. I think that where I come down, I mean, I could sort of try to invent fixes for it. I think that at the end of the day, one thing that I strongly feel is that it either needed to be a 12 episode season, or it needed
Yeah.
to just stay completely focused on Joel and Ellie, stay in their point of view, and not do these detours into other characters' points of view. Um,
Mm,
I just don't think they had enough time to do as much as they tried to do in the season. So I think they either should have tried to do less or had a longer season.
Yeah, I'll definitely lean into that. If I loved the different stories and the perspectives of these other characters, and of course, yeah, I know you and I both did. But
Yeah,
I see
I
what you
loved
mean.
what
If
they
they were
did.
gonna,
Yeah.
yeah, if they were gonna do that, they should have. They should have, like, we're executive producers who work at HBO, but they could have considered, at least 11 episodes, something. I don't think you and I are all being nerdy gamers, and there wasn't enough gameplay, or there wasn't enough like fighting, or I don't think it's necessarily that. I think it's because of the circumstances in the game that Joel and Ellie had to endure and survive. That's so much a part of what built them. At the same time, like, there's so much appreciation that I have for this sort of version of the story in the show. Spectacular performances. However, there was something at the end, and we have so much to cover, but there was something at the end where Ellie was following Joel right up to Jackson, Wyoming. I didn't quite feel the same way I did in the game, where I was like, okay, Ellie has been robbed of this experience. I felt like the show told me so much to not feel that way, that I was like, I think I don't feel that way, but I'm not quite sure.
Well, I mean, I have a sort of a weird perspective on this because game or show, I'm 100% on the side of Joel's choice
Right.
because I
No, of
believe in
course. Me too. Me
medical ethic.
too.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely, I don't know. Yeah,
Where I think I'm saying I felt ambivalent, I guess, is I felt ambivalent, and you know this, I'm very indecisive. It's like you and I, we want to order some food, and it's like we got to have like a 20-minute discussion about it, break it down, and it's a whole thing.
yeah, it is.
So
And then
what
and then what winds
it,
up happening is by the time we get the food, I'm literally like hangry,
yeah,
and
you're
you're
mad,
like,
and like it's
yeah, but you still have to like light candles and change pants and stuff like that. And I'm just like going insane wanting to eat.
Hey, for those dedicated listeners of our show, you know that I'm right about the pants. You got to have the right pants and the right lighting for certain meals and certain shows.
Yeah, and
Anyway, what
also I would say I don't disagree with you completely, but I would also say that I'm right about letting food get cold, getting delicious food and then letting it get cold while
I
you
know it's a
fine
big
tune every detail of the experience.
no,
Also to be
no, no,
avoided.
no. I guess where I'm saying I feel ambivalent is just my experience, in that I'm like, I don't know, for sure, I'm like, Joel should have saved Ellie. It's just it truly felt very different to me, and that is because Joel and Ellie in the show are in some ways different people to me than in the game. I mean, if they're beautiful adaptations. It is the same story. There's something about the way that Joel expressed his experience of trying to commit suicide after losing Sarah, right before Ellie is about to be taken away from us, that felt like I was really thrusted into this, like, oh my gosh, hyper. I couldn't quite digest what I was thinking or feeling at the time. I was just going along with it. And then I was devastated, that it was over, and that it was just like, obviously, Ellie felt differently about Joel. And that, I think, is what broke me, is that you could really see that. I think here more in the show than in the game is like Ellie was so broken because she no longer really trusted Joel.
Maybe. I'm not sure I read the ending as being that clearly about Ellie's mistrust of him.
That's like the whole thing. That's like the creator's intent. That's like the huge debate too, about like, not only did Joel do the wrong thing or the right thing by saving Ellie versus, this cure, but like this wonder, and like this, how Ellie responds to, she asks, is everything you said about the fireflies true? I mean, she's carrying clearly so much doubt in that walk at the end as they're walking towards Jackson. You can see it. Like, something's different. She's turned inward, and she's quiet, and she even says fuck, like she's about to ask Joel a question based on trust. Was everything about the fireflies you said true? And he says, yeah. There's that moment, and she says, okay. She's lost Joel's trust a bit. She knows that he's not being fully honest with her. because this is about trust being broken, like, the director of the show was I mean, I read this somewhere, I don't know if it's, like, a legitimate source or not, but, like, the director of this episode wanted to have an alternative ending where everything is the same, however, you add on Ellie walking ahead with, like, a huge separation between Joel and Ellie to display some sort of, like, relationship broken kind of effect, and I was so glad that they did not do that because, for spoiler alert for seasons ahead, they do have moments in the future after this experience where there's certainly, like, a father-daughter bond, and they're, like, swimming, and he's teaching her how to swim, and they go to a museum. I mean, I don't think it's completely gone here, so I'm so glad that they did not do that alternative ending where they were trying to show Ellie was, like, walking away from Joel.
Yeah, and well, and also the reason that they didn't do that is because they wanted to end it on, a moment that was a little more ambiguous and let the audience ask these kind of questions about whether she believed him and where their relationship might go after this and stuff like that. I mean, I've always interpreted the ending as Ellie, as a kid, kind of knowing that what he's saying probably isn't true, but just in a way, like, putting it aside, you know? Like, I think I feel like and that's kinda what I got because obviously in the games you go further, and as you said, like, very true, these are different versions of the characters, maybe the show will go a different way, but I kinda feel like she, when she says, "Okay," she's saying like, "Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and live in the world where what you're saying is true." But then as time goes
Yeah.
by, she just kind of can't, you know?
Right, right. Yeah, no, I feel like
Because
that's super on point.
Yeah, because what we find out later in the games is that they have another version of this conversation later where she makes him tell the truth, and she needs to hear him say it. She needs to know beyond a shadow of a doubt what actually happened because it's really important to her.
So one thing I really loved about this episode is we got to meet Anna, Ellie's mother, played by Ashley Johnson. Ashley Johnson played Ellie in the video game, and I thought it was like this magical transference of Ellie's, when she gives birth and says, "You're so tough, you tell him, Ellie."
Yeah, I dug it. I mean, it was a great performance from Ashley Johnson. I think
Oh
she
yeah.
immediately became my number one favorite game actor cameo performance in the show.
Oh, for sure.
Another thing about that scene is that, in a previous episode, I was talking about how every time a character on the show gets bit by an infected, they do the thing where like they notice it after the fight, you know? And they did it again here. And for a second, I was like, well, there we go. We're 5 for 5. But then I watched the scene again and I noticed that it actually very clearly shows the moment where the infected puts his
Yeah.
head over and bites her leg.
I was gonna say, I watching it on a second round, I noticed that. I was gonna bring it up to you and be like, "Did you see that?"
I saw it.
So there's 2 things I'm also interested here to discuss. Ashley Johnson's voice is just Ellie. It sounded so much like Ellie.
To the point where it was, like, distracting to me because I kept part of my brain
Really?
kept thinking, like yeah, because part of my brain kept thinking, like, when hearing that voice, I was just, like, tagging it as Ellie in my head, and I was
Yeah.
having, like, an identity crisis. Or I don't
I
know,
get
what's an
that.
identity not for me, but for Ellie. I was
Mm.
having an identity crisis on behalf of a
Mm.
fictional character? I don't know. Anyway, you know what I mean? Like,
I
I
think
kept
that would
thinking it was
just
Ellie.
be called a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
No,
Basically, it drove me to the very edge of sanity,
yeah,
watching the
it
scene.
is. Sounds like it. Again, in some weird way, it was also just, I don't know, m magic because it was cool to see her play the mother of Ellie, and the Ellie that we've gotten to know in the TV show is just so rad, so awesome. Bella Ramsey has done such an incredible job at bringing this character to life on this format. I think I texted this to you and we laughed about it. My parents are watching the show. When they saw the end, we discussed. My mom and dad were like, "Yeah, I think we know why you've been so messed up these past few years." Like it really affected them. Like I was like, "Mom, do you want to know what happens?" She's like, "No, no, I'm not ready. I'm just not ready." I'm like, "Wow!" For with my mom, she can handle a spoiler, but like, holy cow, she was just not ready to
That's
hear what
hilarious. Wow.
happens.
Just wait till they get to season 2, holy shit. But, yeah, no, I was gonna say that what a respectful way to honor the work of a voice actor who originated the character, because the way that she's brought into the show as Ellie's mom is just such a great nod to sort of the passing of the torch from one actor to another playing this character.
Right. Laura Bailey playing one of the nurses at the end. Laura Bailey
Yes.
plays the character Abby in the next season. So, I watched some interview where, like, I think it was Craig Mazin or somebody asked her to join, and she was so ecstatic about it, and I'm just like, "That's so cool." You're like, "You're gonna be wearing a mask, is that okay?" And she was just thrilled to be part of it, and, like,
Yeah.
that just shows you how much everybody fucking cares about this.
Yeah. It's really
Um,
wonderful to know that, I mean, we might have our little quibbles about the show, but you can't fault these creators for their love and their loyalty to the source material.
yeah, no, for sure. Another aspect of the introduction to the finale that I really loved was having the opportunity to understand the relationship between Marlene and Anna, and that they go way back. And I just found that dynamic to be really interesting where Anna knew Marlene enough to say, like, here's Ellie, here's my child, find a good home for her, as if to say she won't be the caretaker. And I think that circles back to something critical later on in a moment between Marlene and Joel.
Yeah, interesting that they tie them together like that. Also, Ellie's signature switchblade, we learn, was passed down to her by her mother in that moment too, which is also kind of a cool little connection that was forged here.
Oh, yeah, which also comes back later towards the end.
Did you notice? Apparently, there was an outcry on the internet about this, but like Marlene gives the dude Ellie, baby Ellie, and she's
Oh, I
like,
know where you're going with this.
cover her,
It
and then the dude totally doesn't cover her ears.
Damn, why didn't that guy cover the baby's ears?
I mean, I think it was just, the reason because Ellie just does not have anybody to protect her from this harsh world.
Oh,
Yeah.
Paul
And then
Jones, you heard it here first.
that's right. Here's what I'll say about Ashley Johnson. HBO, if you're listening, give us a spin-off miniseries about Anna telling the story that takes her up to that moment. How did she get in a
Yes.
situation where she's fleeing through the wasteland 9 months pregnant trying to meet up with Marlene?
Who is the father?
Right, who's the daddy? I w
What?
I want that story.
I know, I think Neil Druckmann wrote a backstory on Anna. I don't know how much of it he wrote, but I'm sure this was, like, a piece of it, but I would definitely watch that miniseries.
Yeah, they could call it The Second to Last of Us.
Get out of here, Paul. I really have loved the adaptation and just the characters that they've brought from the game into the show, whether it be like their characters that they played in the show or a different version. Marlene has been so awesome to just like watch in the game and in the show. She was certainly like a more manipulative, layered person in the show than in the game. I just wanted more of Marlene.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think maybe part of that is because she was different ages. She reflected the age of the actress when she played her, right? So in the game in 2013, Merle Dandridge was 37 and Marlene looked like she was in her 20s, and she came off as sort of a true believer, like an idealistic person who was fighting for, a cause that she really believed in. And then in the show, it's 10 years later, Merle Dandridge is 47 and Marlene is a like much more sort of like weathered, beat down character, still fighting for something she believes in, still an idealist, but also she seems much more ready to sort of do the dirty work that needs to be done for her to advance her cause in the show.
Just such a perfect actor to pull from the game into the show as the same character.
Overall, yeah, definitely 10 out of 10 on bringing in the video game voice actors, and can't wait to see that trend continue for season 2.
Yeah, absolutely. After the scene with Anna and Marlene, we cut to present day and we're with Ellie, and you can sort of see she's like tuned out and not really listening to Joel. And here's sort of where I was like, all right, we're at the beginning of the end here. And I was really nervous because I had so much expectation and hope for the giraffes. And boy, oh boy, I was so thrilled.
Yeah. Yeah, they totally nailed the giraffe scene. I expected nothing less. It's an iconic moment, and I knew. I mean, you can just tell from the care that they have put into those iconic story beats, like the giraffe scene. I was like, yeah, they're gonna get it, and they totally did.
Something that was so cool to watch, and I immediately thought of you while watching the show, is when, like, Ellie finds or Joel or they find a ladder to, like, crawl up to the next floor. I was like, "Here it is. Paul's been looking for this freaking ladder, and we got it."
I did. Yeah, I was very happy about that, video game mechanics in the show. I was super stoked. I was almost and they even did the shot of the ladder overhanging the ledge that is almost exactly what you would see in the game if you looked up to, like, find the ladder, and then the little button prompt would appear over it. It was just
Yeah.
chef's kiss. I'm gonna make a supercut of all the moments in The Last of Us where they use video game mechanics in the show.
You really should.
Yeah.
The moment with the drafts that Joel and Ellie share, it's like it was the last time Ellie really got to be a kid again, or at least we had a chance to see her one more time be a kid again. And I thought that that was really beautiful and heartbreaking. You could see Joel look at her as though this was like her returning to herself and like their relationship was being repaired in some way. To immediately follow with a scene where Ellie shares there's no halfway with this after Joel offers a chance to just like maybe forget this all and like after all she's been through, she realizes they have to keep going. And it's preceded with this scene that I had a hard time wrapping my head around just because it's such a sensitive topic to me, but also like maybe it threw me a little bit where Joel shares that he had attempted suicide. It was just hard to digest at first because it's very different from the game. It's certainly a deviation from the game where he shares this with her. It was one of those, like, we're telling you instead of showing you. At that point, I felt like we were already there emotionally with them, but it also makes me think of how they do, like, a lot of reflecting and mirroring in the show. Because I also thought of Henry in that moment, like, when he lost his little brother, Sam, he shot himself. It just this fungus apocalypse poses a world where it is impossible to go on without your family. And so in some ways I also really appreciated the scene. I'm just not totally there yet, and maybe I will be there when I binge watch this show, but I'm not sure if that specific detail was needed to build the relationship I felt like I already had with Joel and Ellie. Does that make any sense? Because I went on quite a bit
Yeah, it
there.
does. I mean, yeah, no, I totally hear what you're saying. And I also had a reaction to that. I was resistant to it because, I've worked with kids a lot. And it's part of my value system around kids that there's certain things that, like, you shouldn't, as an adult, like, you shouldn't ask them to carry. And I think that telling a 14-year-old girl, like, yeah, I tried to kill myself and I was suicidal for years and now I'm not because of you. Because that's kind of where that goes, right? She's like, time heals all wounds. And he's like, oh, it wasn't time. And she looks a little overwhelmed. I
I'm
mean,
not
that's like a
laughing at the
really
moment, I'm laughing at your voice, sorry.
yeah, no, I understand. um, but I don't know, man. That's just a really heavy trip to lay on a kid, and I never
Right,
would, even if I did feel that way. Like, I don't mind that as like I don't mind revealing that Joel attempted suicide and that he's rediscovered his will to live through connecting with Ellie. I think that that's probably always how he interpreted the character, but the fact that he
right.
would in that moment like choose to lay all that shit on her, it doesn't seem like the choice that would be made by the same character who was like so upset a few episodes ago that she had to shoot a dude.
My interpretation of it was that Joel has taken on this I mean, he's, like, fully a protective father now. He will fight for his life for her. But because, it's been 20 years since his daughter, Sarah, died, he's not emotionally able to navigate a relationship as a father figure again because he's been so in the mode of, like, I operate to protect. No, I mean, I'm on the same page. I think there's a certain level of, like, how much you share with a kid, but, like, when it's your kid, I think she appreciated the honesty. It's really a scene that I would love to revisit and certainly, take more time with.
Yeah, I understand. And it's, like you said earlier, that these are different versions of Joel and Ellie than we were used to. And the big choice that's been made with Joel, which I overall really like, is that he's so much more vulnerable as a character
Oh,
than he is in
yeah.
the game. We've seen flashes of it here and there before. He really got vulnerable with Tommy in that episode, and then here with Ellie. And so the show seems much more willing to dig into Joel's PTSD. I mean, it shows him
Yeah,
having panic attacks a couple episodes ago. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to sort of exploring the next time I do a watch through of the season. Because now that I know what it is and what choices were made, I'm really interested in sort of, now that I sort of have my head around the differences, leaving behind my idea of the characters from the game and really just sort of trying to explore the intricacies of the characters that were created in the show.
right. No, same, same. It was when they were walking together after that moment. Joel says he's in the mood for some bad puns, and Ellie shares them. It's just this really beautiful exchange where, like, everything was right there. Like, everything was right there for me to show they are family now, and I can't be without them. And then, bang, we're pulled into the hospital scene, right
Yeah,
back with
bang
Marlene.
or flash bang, because they throw a flashbang grenade at them.
Yeah.
You didn't like that. I'm trying to do a bad pun in the spirit of the show. You're
I
you're
know.
just
I
joling
love
me.
that it's, like, kinda creepy how you know me a little too well. Like, sometimes I have issues with it. Like, we're on audio here, we're not on video. You can't read my facial expression, but he
Oh, I don't
knows.
need to.
Yeah, like, he knows. Like, he can see my eyes just rolling in the back of my head, man.
Yeah. I mean, I could have
Um,
predicted that reaction before I even said it, really. And then, yeah, that takes us into the closing act of the season and this episode where Joel wakes up in the hospital.
where Joel and Marlene are reunited.
And then that takes us into the final act of the episode and the season. Joel wakes up in the hospital, finds out from Marlene it's a good news, bad news situation. The good news is they made it to the fireflies. They can use Ellie to synthesize an antidote or a cure, they think. Bad news, it involves cutting her brain open and killing her. And so, you know, Joel now must make a choice as to whether to accept their offer of a little walk out to the street and some supplies, or whether to try to save Ellie somehow.
Certainly a unique dynamic between Marlene and Joel where she tries to have some sort of, like, parental ownership towards Ellie and the fact that she was there when Ellie was born, and I had no difficulty handing her baby over to Marlene, with the exception of asking Marlene to find a family to take care of her, knowing it wouldn't be Marlene. And,
Uh
like, in
huh.
the end, w Marlene is ready to sacrifice this child, except with saying, "Okay, I was there for her birth, so it excuses whatever feelings I have to save the world." To your point, Marlene is on a mission here, but can recognize immediately that Joel has this emotional connection with Ellie. And so now that Ellie has a caretaker, now that Ellie has this father figure, wow, the what ensues blows my mind. Like, I just thought it just the music choice too for, like, Joel to get to Ellie was phenomenal.
Yeah. It was interesting. It was an interesting choice. They went with like a sort of an emotional, sort of quiet, slow motiony kind of killing fest.
There was so much discussion around this scene of Joel's soul, like, being turned off. For me, I interpreted it as being turned on, like his soul switched back on because he was incapable of losing his child again. And to see him go on this murderous rampage really just showed us all the references throughout this show on his capabilities of how dangerous he could be, Um, for such, like, a vulnerable, goofy guy too at times, to see him go into this mode feels extra, like it's extraordinary. And so I think what it is ultimately after having this conversation is that I'm just 10 times more heartbroken than in the game that Ellie feels betrayed somehow, because earlier on she had been forward thinking and saying, after this we'll like go to the sheep farm, we'll go to the moon. She says, I will follow you anywhere. So we really feel like there's a future for them. After Joel finds Ellie and they go to the basement, this garage, they encounter Marlene. Ellie is still passed out from going into surgery. They kind of like pose to each other if this is the right thing to do. And it's like, Marlene says, Is this what Ellie would want?" I don't know if this is what Ellie would want under these circumstances. I don't know if it's what Ellie would have wanted.
I don't think it is. I think that if the Fireflies, instead of just sort of knocking Ellie out and then trying to get rid of Joel, had instead, given them some hot cocoa and some food and let them wake up and hang out a little bit and then explain the situation. Like, I think Ellie would have volunteered for the procedure and she would have talked Joel into accepting it. And that's what
Well,
I think.
that's a boring story.
Right, I know, I'm not saying, yeah, that would
That
not have been as
that's a
interesting as
different
what happened,
story.
but no, but I'm saying, like, just in terms of the characters, like, yeah, I think that's what Ellie would have wanted if we
Yeah.
accept their explanation that
Mm.
they 100% can synthesize an antidote by immediately killing the only person who's immune to the disease and cutting open their brain. A lot of medical professionals have been reacting negatively to the way that the Fireflies chose to handle this in the
Yeah, I
show.
say back to my mom, she sent me, like, an ethics article about Joel's decision and what happened with the fireflies. I haven't read it yet.
Well, yeah, my thing is like, obviously, so that we've kind of like eased into it, but this is an extremely divisive conversation that's been going on
Yeah.
in the fan community since the game came out in 2013, right? Like, what do we think about
Right,
what Joel did?
right.
I don't know. Like, we could rehash a lot of it here, but one thing that I don't hear brought up very much is that the Fireflies are committing a grave breach of medical ethics by operating on a child without the informed consent of really anyone involved. you know, Joel doesn't get a
Yeah.
chance to consent as the surrogate father figure, and the child doesn't even know what's being done. Right. And so if you want to make the argument that, well, the ends justify the means because supposedly they're going to have this vaccine that saves humanity, fine. But most of the
Mm.
people who characterize Joel as a monster for doing what he did don't seem to acknowledge that they're making an ends justify the means argument. It's just treated as like a foregone conclusion that, well, obviously the Fireflies were right to immediately cut Ellie's brain open.
It's so odd because I haven't dived into that perspective as much. Like, I know it's out there, I've read about it, but I've just been so in the mindset of, like, Joel protecting what is now his family.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that there's two different what I was going to say was you were saying that you hadn't heard this view stated a lot. Well, I'll tell you, like, as somebody who was having a lot of arguments with all my gamer friends about this game, not only is that view out there, but I think it was predominant for a long time. And I think part of the reason is because a lot of the people who were playing video games in 2013 were not parents. And one thing that I think it was
Mm,
Druckmann,
interesting.
maybe it was Mason, but one of those guys in an interview said that, basically when people react to the ending of Last of Us, if they're not a parent, they think that what Joel did was wrong, and if they are a parent, they think that what he did was right.
See, what I read was that Neil Druckmann thought either perspective was fine as long as you didn't feel ambivalent about it.
Well, yeah, that's the main thing. I mean, and that's what's so beautiful about the ending is it demands that you
It
have a
just
really strong opinion on it,
exactly.
and
Which
everyone does.
as we've discussed, I'm the worst case scenario to have an extremely strong opinion on this. No, that's not true. I mean, I feel really strongly that Joel did the right thing. I don't know. It's hard to wrap my head around it in a broader scope other than that, like, I was just with Joel all the way.
Yeah, I was too. I mean, I remember from the moment that I first played through the ending of the game, these many years ago, I had this sort of like creeping horror at the prospect that a vaccine was now not going to be possible. But ultimately, it didn't change how I felt about the end. You know, and at the time
So
Last of Us came out, it was really big for games to give you a choice that would lead to
mm,
multiple endings when you got to the end of the game.
yeah.
You know, now we have games that have a lot more choices in them. Back then there weren't that many, but when you get to the end of Last of Us, it really felt like a moment where the game was going to be like save Ellie and like give you a choice about what to do. And
Mm,
and then it doesn't, which was hailed as a bold storytelling move. You know, when it came out or
I love it.
criticized as limiting the player's ability to interact with it. Um
But,
so
like,
I
I
but
mean,
but
it's a linear game, you know? Like, this is not an open world, we've got so many choices, like
Yeah, no, but in 2013, they were doing that, like, in linear games. They would do, like,
yeah.
a completely linear
Okay.
game and then give you, like, 1 or 2 big choices at the end. So, it was kind of a new
Mm,
thing. It was, like, in vogue at that time. So, I don't know. But
gotcha.
the reason I
Okay.
bring it up is because my experience when I was playing it the first time, I had already made up my mind. I was like, "If they give me a choice, I am saving this kid no matter
Of
fucking
course.
what." You know?
Of course. See, yeah, no, that's the thing, like, this story does such a great job of building this relationship where it's like you will sacrifice like, you will do anything to save this kid. I mean, the whole TV show has given us scenarios of, like, different characters and their perspectives and the meaning of love and the beginning and the ending and how it mirrors each other, and it's just like, it makes sense for me after just watching the show that Joel would save Ellie. Where I just felt emotionally ripped apart was that walk at the end when she questioned him. For some reason that it just got me so much more than it did in the game. And I don't know why. I'll have to think about that over time.
Yeah, and on a second viewing of the show, you know? Let me ask you this. Do you think that I'm still trying to decide how I feel about this, and it's something that I'm gonna be watching as I go through the show again. Do you think that the creators of the show put their thumb on the scale a little bit more in terms of guiding the audience toward one opinion or the other with regards to the ending? Because the game I
Mm.
have always felt leaves you in an almost like 50-50 thing where, like, you can find a lot of support for either the pro or the con argument about what Joel did. Do you think that the show stays that neutral, or do you think it tips the scales in one way or the other? And if so, in which direction?
Ooh, good question. I think in playing the game, there's certainly that like 50-50 feel where at least I felt the show and these characters told me to save Ellie's life.
Really? Because I felt like the show kind of wanted to pass judgment on Joel a little bit more than the game did.
And I think that's why that walk towards Jackson, Wyoming, where it was just the two of them was so much more like difficult to sit with because we finally have Joel just like sharing. He's talking about his daughter, he's talking about Sarah scampering off, climbing rocks. You can see Ellie trying to play along a bit, kind of similar to the game. Like I remember playing the game and being like, "Oh, that's so sweet." Like Joel has opened up, he's talking about Sarah. You finally see like Joel, like I could cry. You could finally see like Joel sharing and Ellie for the first time is turning away from that. And like for whatever reason, it was much more heartbreaking in this TV series. I'd have to play the game again to really do an honest comparison, just remembering my visceral reactions in the moment.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that a lot of it is just kind of the same thing we've been saying all along that these
Yeah.
things all take on so much more dimension when you're seeing these two excellent actors living their way through the moments. You know, as good as the game is,
Yeah.
these CG characters can only take you so far in terms of taking you on this emotional journey.
To your question, yeah, I felt like the game gave us a world where there was more of a 50-50. But in the show, for me, I felt like it was leaning heavily towards Joel. Saving her life was the most, if not the absolute right thing to do.
But to circle back, I think that the reason that I felt like this show was a little bit more judgmental of Joel, I'm trying to figure out how to put that into words. I don't even know if I can.
Yeah, it's
Um,
hard because, like, you pose that question, they put him in a position to be so vulnerable. It was more easy to criticize him because there were so many layers to his decision.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. Yeah, this requires a lot of unpacking, and it's something that I'm going to be like focusing on really closely as I rewatch the show at some point to see if the show is trying to tell me how to feel or not. I'm not sure if it is. I kind of got the sense that it was, but that might just be because of comments that I read from the creators that and not because of stuff I saw on the screen, you know.
I totally now feel like the show is asking us to criticize Joel for sure, but criticize him in the way where we may have our hearts broken like 10 times more later on.
Well, yeah, I think you're right that the show is, I mean, the show is definitely drawing our attention to sort of his motives a lot more than the game ever did.
Yeah.
And asking us to think about, like you said, I'm just repeating stuff you said, but yeah, I think you're right. I don't know how I feel. I don't know which side the show is coming down on, if it is. I'm again, my sense of it has been that it's asking us to criticize him. Um, I think probably the way I feel the reason I feel that way is because of the time that the
Mm,
show spent on Marlene and the way that the show sort of took a little bit
mm.
more care to tell us explicitly that the fireflies believed that they were going to be creating a cure with this, you know.
Yeah.
But again,
I mean,
all stuff that I need to think more deeply about and watch again.
I just feel like Marlene doesn't know when she says that's, what Ellie would want. She doesn't know what Ellie wants. And so, like, something about that moment is asking us to believe that.
Well, it's also just so fucking hypocritical, you know, because Marlene
Mhm.
is saying, like, basically criticizing Joel for not letting Ellie have a choice. I mean, that's the subtext, but like neither of them let Ellie have a choice.
Neither
So
of them,
it's
right?
it's just so hypocritical for Marlene to say, "Look, I know that Ellie would want to have her brain cut open for this, so you need to back off." Like, I'm like, no, you don't. You're right. Yeah, I think that I do tend to think that probably the likeliest thing is that Ellie would go along with it, but you know,
That's what I'm having a hard time with, Paul, is that I feel like in this version of this story with these characters, the ending is asking us to believe that that's what Ellie would want. To her to unknowingly have been killed to maybe have been the cure. And
right?
in the game, I was, like, completely sold, totally Joel did the right thing. Same for the show. Joel did the right thing. Where I feel things are different, the show's asking me to believe that Ellie would want it to have been sacrificed. That's hard for
Yeah.
me to wrap my head around.
I kind of thought that was true in the game too, although not to the same degree because I think one difference, the Ellie that we meet in the show seems to be a much more wise beyond her years type of character. I mean, the version in the game kind of was,
Hmm.
but in the show she's much more of an adult than she was in the game.
That's so
And
crazy you say that because to me in the show, she was much more of a kid in so
there
many ways.
well, there's moments of that. Yeah, there's moments where she's a kid, but also like there's big picture stuff, like the dynamic where she's very intentionally trying to draw Joel out of his
Mhm.
shell using a bunch of different tactics in the early episodes, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a parent to child interaction with Ellie as the parent, you know, like cajoling him into like relating in a more positive way and be in a better mood. And the game Ellie did nothing like that. You know, she would crack jokes, but it was just a kid cracking jokes. You know, it wasn't as tactical feeling. So I mean, that's just one example. But there's
Yeah,
a
I
lot of
see.
places where we see the show Ellie
Mm.
demonstrating a really sophisticated understanding of things that wasn't for me as present in the game version.
Yeah. No, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I agree with that. But I
Yeah.
mean, wow, what a ride. I mean, I think what we've both learned is that this is just amazing storytelling.
Yeah. And I mean, it's part of the joy of this of this franchise of the game was, you know, digging into all these kinds of questions and speculating about the deeper motivations of the characters and the
Yeah.
moral implications. And the show has given us a whole new set of questions to ask about the same characters in the same events. So what a fun thing it's going to be to
Yeah.
continue to think about. But I will say that of all the stuff that I've loved that's been adapted, Last of Us was, you know, hit more of the night right notes than I ever would have dared hope for. You know, they really did kill
Yeah.
most of it.
You're
And so
that's
yeah, it's been a
true.
wonderful journey. And thanks everybody for joining us and listening. It's been wonderful to be able to share our feelings and our experience of this show with a growing community that are also having their own feelings and their own experience with it.
Exactly. Well put, Paul. Gosh, guys, well, I guess we're wrapping it up, huh?
Yeah,
Season 1 of The
season
Fungus
one.
Among Us.
That's right. So, stay tuned. We're not stopping the podcast just because the show stopped. We got some stuff in the
Yeah,
works. I mean,
we've
as
got
promised,
stuff
at some
coming up,
point,
guys.
that's right. Yeah, we're going to do our marathon rewatch and sort of do like a, 1 month later or like 3 months later or whenever we do it, and where we sort of digest a little bit more the show, talk more.
Yeah, we have specific aspects of the show that we will be tuning into, such as like Savage Starlight. We definitely are looking forward to guests coming onto the show. And spoiler alert for everyone listening in. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. This is getting into questions about the next season. So, Paul, how do you think the next season's going to turn out?
You mean like how's it going to end?
Will Joel die? Will we be introduced to Abby? Will
Yeah.
season 2, part 1 just be Ellie's perspective and season 2, part 2 be Abby's perspective?
Okay. Well, I first of all, actually, have you heard we didn't talk about it, but I initially thought Abby was in this finale in the operating room in the background with Scrubs, because there's a third character back there who's not part of the operation that's wearing scrubs. But then also I saw this other thing online where, like, do you remember when Joel is going through shooting everybody? There's somebody like running away and you don't get a good look at the person, but they run past the camera and somebody freeze
Hmm.
framed that. And it really looks from the silhouette like it could be Abby. Pretty
Whoa,
crazy stuff.
I gotta look it up.
Yeah, because I have to go back and rewatch the scene. But do you remember, like, as he's slaughtering all the fireflies, there is some weird unseen figure that you see running away that gets away.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, why would they put that in? Just show that like one of the guys fled without really
Maybe they're
showing it?
showing like a guy fled, or that's potentially like Abby's not boyfriend. I forget. I don't know how to describe him. But
I think he was her
there's
boyfriend.
definitely like hints to future characters that play like a major role in the future of, Ellie and Joel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, we're talking about Abby, a character that is the daughter of the doctor in that surgery room that Joel kills.
Yeah. That's why she kills Joel. She wants revenge for her daddy. I'm sorry. I
Didn't you
shouldn't
say
have
that
said
with
daddy that way. I
Yeah,
didn't.
that's creepy.
Uh, sometimes I say daddy in a creepy way just to creep you out because I think it's funny. And I do it without even thinking about it now.
Yeah, you do to creep me out because I don't like the whole, I think it's gone a bit far.
It is. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, yeah. To answer your question, though, here's how I would guess that season 2 would go. Huh.
I know,
Uh,
right? It's like it's such a monster to
it's confusing, and Last of Us Part 2 is a real plate of spaghetti of a story. I mean, there's a lot of threads intertwining, and it's all like,
Yep.
in crazy chronological order. It's jumping around in time, so it's a tough question. My guess would be that the arc of season 2 is that it's going to be a lot more linear than the
Mhm.
game was, and it's going to pick
Yeah.
up, shortly after the season 1 left off, and they're going to be in. Well, I don't know.
It's
Chronologically, I'm not going to speculate because there's a lot of ways that could go. But what I'm going to guess is that the
Yeah.
arc of the season is going to be about introducing Abby and her faction. And the main arc is going to be about Joel and Ellie and their relationship and them dealing with the fallout of his deceit at the end of this season. And we're going to get to the point where Ellie forgives Joel right around the same time that Abby shows up, and then she kills him in the season finale.
Yeah.
That's my
See, I
guess.
have this feeling it's gonna kind of all happen right up front,
I would be
and we're gonna
crazy if
deal
they
with.
did that. It might make more sense in terms of story if they do it that way, but also if they do, it's going to be bonkers. I mean, that's what the game did.
It'll be bonkers for sure. I just have this feeling, I don't know, to get us more acquainted with Abby. Because one thing that was so hard for me to navigate when I was playing the game, you remember, I had to take a 2-week break. The moment we switched perspectives into Abby, I was like, I couldn't handle it, like, mentally, and, like, I called you up, I even had to have, like, us share play and, like, you go through a couple of
Yeah, I
things
had to
for
play the
me.
first couple Abby levels
Yeah,
for you
because
because you couldn't bring yourself to do it.
you had finished the game before me, and I was freaking out. I was like, "Paul, like, are we getting towards the end here? What's going on? What's going on?" And, like, once we switched perspectives, I really did wrestle with the idea of being the killer of Joel, right? But, like, as time went on, like, I feel like the feedback was a little bit too harsh, to be honest. I think it was really powerful storytelling that we were able to, like, also be this kid that went through a trauma in this same world and get this person's perspective and why they would want to hunt down and kill someone as beloved as our Joel. So I mean, I just think it's just interesting storytelling, to be honest. So I mean, I don't know. I'm definitely like I'm ready for season 2.
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember, yeah, in the game, I was like, Paul, you got to play this for me. I'm so messed up from this right
Well,
now.
also you hated Abby. I was like, "Dude." Yeah,
At
I mean, we all
first,
did at first because
to
it
be
was
fair,
harsh.
I've grown, and I've grown to love her.
I
I
do know, yeah.
love her character so
But yeah
much that like I'm looking forward to replaying her.
but yeah, I remember in the well, because also it's so jarring to be put in control of her at first because 'cause you're at the peak of hating her, and then all of a sudden you
Oh
are her,
yeah.
and I remember as I was playing through those early levels as Abby on your save, and you were watching, I would be like, "I don't know, Abby's, kinda grown on me, I think she's kinda cool," you know?
I finally got to where you were at, but when you were trying to, like, intellectually break that down for me, I was like, "Nope, nope." I was just, like, emotionally shut down. I mean, it's asking us to do something really extreme, so, like, I'm wondering if the show will do the same thing.
I just feel like that they will be reluctant to traumatize their viewership so early in the season and possibly I mean, something like that could really
Maybe.
hurt the show. If it went the wrong way, if the internet didn't like it,
Mm,
I don't know. And then also, I'm just wondering if they will be willing to lose Pedro Pascal that soon. I mean, TV's relies on this core cast that people want to come back and see every week. And so in the TV world,
yeah.
I mean, Joel is an unkillable character who gets killed, and that's a very tough thing to get an audience to accept. And a big part of
Yeah.
the game's audience did not accept it.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading extreme things and I was and as much as disappointed as I was also like, "Calm down, internet." You know what I
People
mean?
freaked out. Well,
The
also that was in what, like June or July of 2020, where we were
Yeah, we
all
were all losing our
we were
minds.
all completely out of our fucking minds at that point.
What a time for, like, a fungus apocalypse to come out
Oh,
in
dude,
the
it was
middle of, like, a pandemic.
it was balm for the soul.
Like, I dragged that game out for the whole summer of
Yeah.
2020.
I remember too, like, that because that game, everybody was talking about how depressing it was and how brutal the violence was and how a lot of the critics were talking about like, oh my God, it's so hard to get through, even worse than the first one because it's just so fucking violent. And then you and I would get on the
Oh.
phone and be all secretive and be like, I actually really like it. I like,
We were like,
I like,
"I like the way she breaks the glass. I
yeah.
like the way she stabbed that guy."
Yeah, be like, oh my God,
Like,
I killed this guy and he was begging for his life.
Paul, I laid down all of these smoke bombs and then I took them all out with an arrow.
Oh, this makes me want to go play it.
And to be clear, we do not condone violence. We're in the world of video games strictly.
It's horrible in real life. In video games, it owns.
It's really hard for me to end this podcast, especially for a beloved show, beloved game. It's like I'm certainly looking forward to what we do next, and it's just been an honor to talk about all of this and share our experiences with each other and with you all.
That's right. So, yeah, thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned. And we'll see you next time on
The Fungus Among Us podcast.